All right, so this is my first time using this slideshow application. I'm pretty excited. I want to dig into this topic right now, the human gut microbiome. So microbiome, biome is just basically an ecosystem, and we're looking at it on the micro level, and in particular, we're looking at it in the human body. We have microbiomes on various parts of the human body, but I'm going to look at the gut because that has been a big topic of discovery in the medical community lately, and it's something that for anybody who's ever suffered from heartburn, constipation, diarrhea, even low energy or things like depression, this is a very, very relevant topic. Let's jump right now to the definition of the microbiome. Biologist Joshua Lederberg describes it as a totality of microorganisms, including bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and fungi, and their collective genetic material present in our gastrointestinal tract. So, contrary to what we might expect, actually back in the 1880s was when the discovery that we lived in symbiosis with microorganisms was first brought to anybody's attention. And while, in the last decade, especially in the 2010s, there's been a huge ramp up in the activity around microbiome research, it's actually been known about for quite a long time. So the microbiome affects a lot within you. Your gut microbiome is a very, very consequential organ in your body. It modulates central nervous system activity. It helps you break down fiber, and as we'll find out later, it has a lot of interactions with fiber that are very meaningful and very important. It can affect how a person's fat distribution and fat accumulation takes place. It promotes intestinal health in general. Angiogenesis, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a expert on that terminology, but it promotes gut health. And it is a protection against pathogens. Works in concert with your gut lining, your secretory IgA, to be able to, regulate inflammation and utilize inflammation to actually kill any bad intruders that enter the gut. The synthesis of vitamins, basically you have building blocks of, things that can become vitamins, and there are reactions by members of the gut microbiome that basically convert, one thing to another. And then you also have the development, and I would say the preservation and, adaptation of the immune system, which is very, very important. So you have different types of microbiomes. Of course, we're focusing on the gut, which I would include the stomach and the colon in that, but sexual organs, skin, lungs, mouth, nose, these are, new microbiomes, not new in existence, but new of discovery or emphasis that scientists are learning more about today. So why do we have a slide called What is Epigenetics? And obviously, you see on the insignia, I jacked this from TED Talks. But epigenetics are, from my layman's point of view, it is the interaction between genes in your environment, or it is genetics that can be passed down via acquired traits, like people who are survivors of genocides and terrible events, they can pass on higher stress and cortisol levels to their offspring than, people in their group who didn't go through such events will pass on. You can basically acquire traits in your life, or acquire, an illness in your life, or acquire in this respect, certain microbial makeup in your gut microbiome during your lifetime due to factors that were in your environment, and you can pass those on to your offspring. And this might be, kind of ancillary, but it's also been shown that babies born via C-section have a different microbiome than babies who are born vaginally, and that the contact that you have immediately when you're spit out of the womb, for lack of a better term, is going to be part of the palette of which your microbiome builds on for the rest of your life. And that's why they within the hygiene hypothesis, mothers who maybe weren't exposed to the things to help their immune system, they have a higher incidence of giving birth to children with autism and other disorders associated with immune system dysregulation. All right, is this a social justice warrior slide just randomly thrown in the middle? No, it is not. Diversity is extremely important in this talk because the microbiome, throughout all its different complexities and all the things we could say about it, things we're still learning about it, the vast amount of knowledge that we don't yet know about it, one thing that is starting to arise as a clear pattern is that gut microbiomes with stronger diversity are going to be stronger for your health, essentially. They're going to be a more healthy ecosystem. And people have, and sort of like as above, so below, people have viewed this within large biomes, meaning like, let's say like a wetlands. Say there's a wetlands area near your city. If the diversity of species starts to drop off, other species are going to be affected until the point where the habitat becomes very unstable and a lot of things begin to die in an exponential fashion. So, the fact that you have ducks, the fact that you have water beetles, the fact that you have birds, the fact that you have wolves, all of that interacts to sort of support each other, even if some of those animals eat each other. The fact that their presence is there and their scat is there and their habits are there and they're waking each other up and forcing each other to adapt. It all plays a part in the microbiome or in the biome, and the same is true in the microbiome inside you. That if you can have some quote unquote bad bugs, but they're never going to overrun you if you have tons of different types of bugs that kill that strain or keep it at bay, keep it in check. It's like a monarchy or kingdom in the past. If you're the king of England, and there's a really bad person who's the Prince of Wales, and they're, just cutting off everybody's head and cutting off everybody's testicles, what's going to happen is that, if you're in a more powerful country and there's a whole nation or there's a whole conglomeration of kings and dukes and queens, then what's going to happen is that one rogue person, they're not going to be able to dominate the landscape. They're going to have to fall back and be within a tapestry of other rulers. It's sort of like you have Kim Jong-un in North Korea, but the fact that there are so many other nations that are more powerful, that have different interests, that can undercut them economically if they do certain things, it prevents any one group from being able to take over the world. Diversity in your gut microbiome prevents any one strain from being able to cause a problem in your gut. If you build it, they will come. So basically there's a lot of synergistic positive effects that come from being a person with a strong microbiome. You might be a person epigenetically, your father and your grandfather and your great-grandfather and your great-great-grandfather, they all had GERD. They all weren't making enough stomach acid. They all had, and they passed that on as an intensifying trait generation to generation. And, they all had dysbiosis. Their gut bacteria was all out of whack. But, even if you were raised in that context, there are things you can do that we're going to talk about later. And this is one of those areas of health where you can't just rely on the WebMD website to say, oh, you have this. it is a chronic condition. It is lifelong. There is no hope. There will never be a cure. Anything else is a hoax, etc., etc. This is one area of science that's actually legitimized, that's actually mainstream, that is not politically incorrect to learn about for scientists, where they don't get their career destroyed like they do if they look into some other things that are true. They are allowed to look into this for the time being. There's already been such a body of work on the microbiome and on the fluctuations and plasticity of the microbiome that it's a very exciting area to where I believe that, in the coming, years, we're going to find more consistent, more proven ways to manipulate it. They've already found that with fecal transplants, they can cure people of C. difficile infection, which is an infection that basically in the past you would get for life until it killed you. And it was a byproduct of having a microbiome that was out of whack and having a fragile ecosystem down there. Basically fecal transplants have been shown to help with some other things. Like there's been some evidence that they can help with, IBS or inflammatory bowel disease, although there has been a little bit of like the politically correct police hounding in on that and making it pretty much not legal to prescribe it for anything except for C. diff right now. But it appears as if it's just a matter of time before the research on fecal transplants kind of makes it indisputable that this is something that should be widely available, cost-effective, and prescribed and covered by insurance. So that's a bright spot for anybody who has any type of digestive distress. Dysbiosis, I've mentioned this word a couple times in this slide. It is when your microbiome is fragile, unstable, not diverse, uniform. The species are getting lesser and lesser. What are some things that can cause this? We talked about the C-section birth versus the vaginal birth. That's a risk factor, being born by C-section. Being raised in a very hygienic way. You live in an apartment complex, up there on a high floor where there's no bugs. No like insects. Obviously there's bacteria everywhere, but there's less bacteria. You have a wealthy parent, a wealthy boomer Gen Xer parent who doesn't care, who this knowledge was totally unavailable and unexpected when they were coming up, and so they've Lysoled everything your whole life. Every time you've had dirt on you, they've washed you off because you're gonna get sick. Every time you've just been protected from germs at school, at work, at home, through your own doing, exposed to all these chemicals, just bleaching things down every week. It's really not good. So that's dysbiosis, and this has been shown to... They're not sure the causal link yet, although the causal link is you can kind of infer certain things, although obviously scientists don't really do that right out the gate, and that's good because we want them to be accurate. But it does really appear that this is a thing that you environmentally acquire over your life, and this is a contributing factor to the heightened prevalence of autoimmune diseases, which is going up like a freaking hockey stick. The heightened prevalence of depression, other mental problems, and so here we are. We're dealing with dysbiosis right now. There are so many different things that people argue about in the health world. The naturopaths and the MDs are at each other's throats. The MDs think that the naturopaths are, like airy-fairy, feminine cowards, and the naturopaths think that the MDs are hyper-realistic, self-important jackasses who only care about their prestige. And so there's a lot of mud being slung back and forth. The industries themselves sue each other and try to legislate each other out of any influence. And it's a shame because, both disciplines have things to offer and they get radicalized in a sense by such things. This fiber question, fiber being good for the microbiome, soluble fiber, and just basically fiber in general, undigestible food, serving as fuel for the positive microbes in you. This is becoming less and less controversial. This is becoming something that is accepted by many people. I've seen people, who advocate the carnivore diet, or people who advocate the paleo diet, or not the paleo diet, but the ketogenic diet, in very, very markety, email listy type of ways. Those factions try to deny this, but it's really undeniable. The medical literature bears this out right now, and this is sort of like the cutting edge of some of this stuff. At least the cutting edge as far as I know. I don't read the journals every day, but from a person who's mildly obsessed with the microbiome, this is what I'm seeing coming out. So fiber. Fiber, basically food that's not digestible by your stomach acid or your enzymes or your stomach and small intestine. It makes it all the way through the colon, partially undigested. The fiber sits there for the period of time that the poo sits in the last foot of your colon, and that's where most of your gut microbiome is. The 5 to 7 pounds that's considered an organ, and it eats this fiber, and so it multiplies. And so this is thought in a lot of ways to be more efficient than putting probiotics down your throat, because if you can make a population of something increase by a lot, it's more efficient than just trying to add a little members of the population. That can be good maybe to seed the ground, and it's hard to know just experimenting within yourself any exact thresholds on these things. But by and large, people should have fermented foods, and people should have soluble fiber, and that's going to increase their microbiome diversity. And we'll see an example of that coming up. All right, and so I'll just put it out there. I got nothing against video games. I just wanted to put out a picture that kind of showed the modern lifestyle versus the ancestral lifestyle. And the ancestral one is embodied here by the Hadza. And the thing about the Hadza is they are considered one of the last true hunter-gatherer tribes in the world. And so they are often studied in terms of microbiome research, because they represent perhaps how our immune system evolved and where it evolved even, and how things should be with our microbiome and with our immune system responses. And so and they don't have a bad life expectancy if you don't factor in infant mortality, because I think a fourth of their infants do die because of, infections or just issues with birth. And so obviously overcoming that's been a great part of the modern world, but we got to learn from different sources and see if we can have the best of both worlds. But anyways, you see the guy on the left playing video games, probably sanitizes everything, probably bleaches everything down once in a while, probably, takes a couple showers a day, is very, very, feels like, cleaning all the surfaces in his home are going to protect him from germs that would give him a cold. And so his microbiome, think of his skin microbiome, that's going to be diminished. I'm sure his gut microbiome is going to be diminished because everything he eats is going to be pasteurized. Everything he, consumes, he's probably not having fermented foods. He's probably not doing all that good stuff. You look at the Hadza dude on the right there, and so he's biting straight into a honeycomb. He just reached into that tree and straight up stole the honeycomb from the bees. And, that sucks for the bees, but, you see one of them there is getting their revenge on his forehead. When the Hadza do this operation, they often get stung, more than 100 times on their body. I guarantee you if the guy on the left got stung more than 100 times by bees, he wouldn't just be ignoring it. He would go. He would probably end up in the ER. He'd probably swell up like a balloon. He would possibly die because he's going to be somewhat allergic to bee venom. he's not going to have an immune system that is intelligent enough to be able to protect him from all the germs that people like the Hadza encounter, but also be so lax and so anti-inflammatory under the conditions of getting a bunch of bee stings. He may get one bee sting and die. So why is the immune system of the Hadza like that? Why do they have they never heard of hay fever and seasonal allergies? Why have they never heard of someone dying from a bee sting or a bunch of bee stings? I'm sure there's a limit where they eventually die, but that's just a small example. Why do they, why don't they have any autoimmune disease? Why don't they have any, big percentage of heart disease? It's not just because they're eating, low fat or low sugar. I mean, that honeycomb is packed with sugar. They kill animals all the time and they eat a lot of meat. But they were born straight into the dirt. And they were, when they were raised pretty much outdoors, they were raised in huts, but they were hunting all the time and just going out all the time and foraging all the time. They get up and they hustle every day for food, and they kill it fresh and they eat it fresh. They drink out of ponds, and they've been drinking out of ponds their whole life that zebras and other animals are pooping in. And so obviously that stuff is gross. We don't got to throw out the baby with the bathwater and drink feces. But the thing is that incidentally throughout our ancestral time, that's the type of stuff that we came in contact with. That's the type of stuff that our immune system was trained to deal with. It's almost like our immune systems have atrophied, with the amount, and their gut microbiomes, the Hadza, when you study them, their microbiomes are so diverse. They can have 10 times more strains than we have or more. And I like to always get into the numbers of it because, I want to be able to riff off it and not just have things in front of me. But they have a lot more diverse microbiomes. That is safe to say. But it's interesting because the Hadza have been exposed to antibiotics recently, and they've been studied, but they can take an antibiotic and bounce back within a couple days. Americans can take an antibiotic and retain a state of dysbiosis in their gut for the rest of their freaking lives. So it's a big difference. It's not good for your microbiome to have antibiotics, but it's good that we have them because we don't want to die of simple infections. So if we're going to have them, we might as well have a terrain of our gut that is able to be resilient to such things. The resilience of the microbiome is really what's interesting about the Hadza, and a lot of this stuff, it's do you only acquire it early in life, or can you really fundamentally change your microbiome later in life? That stuff we're still figuring out, but we want to make sure that, that we understand all the science as it's coming out. So the Hadza's microbiome is really diverse. They eat tons of fiber. They eat a bunch of fruit. They eat a bunch of veggies and tubers, and they eat, and everything they eat has either dirt or animal bacteria on it. And so, it's not like they seek out fermented foods, or they're these, hippy dippy people, going to Whole Foods trying to find the trendy food, like MDs might accuse some of us of being like. They're not like that. They're just doing what they're doing. They're doing what they have the means to do. It's not like they're these unique snowflakes to where if they're presented with, bad choices, they wouldn't take them just like we would. They certainly would. But they just, their lifestyle is not at that level yet where they have those modern conveniences. And maybe that's a good thing for them. But in any case, they're a very interesting study when it comes to the microbiome. And I could say a lot about them, but let's keep this concise. All right, so why invest in your microbiome? Why spend an inordinate amount of time, as you might see it, thinking about, one organ, thinking about one process in your body? Well, it's actually a lot of different processes, and it affects a lot of different things. People talk about the gut-brain connection. That is a place where the rubber majorly hits the road for the microbiome. The gut-brain connection is going to manifest in greater focus, greater patience, greater ability to socialize. You find it interesting at all that, people with autism have extreme gut dysbiosis and extreme gut problems. And they also are, afraid to socialize or bad at picking up social cues by definition. Have you ever, hopefully you don't have an autoimmune disease, but I know a lot of people do now. And, I've certainly experienced situations of systemic inflammation. So I can tell you firsthand that when you're having some kind of inflammatory attack, you do not feel social. You do not feel good. You do not feel like a go-getter, and you do not feel, you can do those things, but it's just going to be more of an uphill battle. Then when you feel good and your hormones and everything are all flowing at the right ratios and you just feel like everything is done easy. That's probably how certain things feel for the Hadza. And obviously they don't necessarily manifest as big house because it's just a different context. But they're doing what they do very freaking well. And they're hunting and gathering with skill that you couldn't do. Like, you couldn't throw something into the air and stab a bird and eat the bird and cook it and prepare it in this efficient way. You could if you had training, you know what I mean? But they have clear minds, for these tasks that they do. And do you want a clear mind for the tasks that you do? Do you want to end up in the house in this slide? Or is it a different goal that you have? Do you want to end up in a nice car? Do you want to end up with nice relationships? Have you ever had the cold or the flu? If you've had the cold or the flu, you know that you don't feel charming, you don't feel social, you don't feel happy, and you don't feel expansive when you have the cold or the flu. Why is that? Is it because that one germ is that powerful to you? No, it's mostly because your immune system is mounting an inflammation, thankfully, to kill that infection. But a byproduct of that is that you're going to be cranky, you're going to be crabby, and you're going to be hard to deal with. Are those traits going to get you your goals? Are those traits going to put you where you want to be and have you achieve what you want to achieve? So many things are possible through enhancing the microbiome. We just have to figure out to what degree we can manipulate it ourselves and how we do that, And so the fiber is a clear piece of, so far there's something to go off. So keep the fiber in mind. But, what about physical goals? Getting big, if you're into building muscle, getting lean. These things are so controlled by the microbiome. If you're not producing a lot of enzymes and a lot of those things to convert the vitamins, you think that you're going to gain muscle, you think that you're going to have good recovery, you think that you're going to be able to work out more than twice in a week without feeling like you're going to die, you think you're going to be able to do more than you can do without hurting a muscle and injuring yourself. You have to have those metabolic processes happening. The people like Arnold Schwarzenegger and The Rock and these super healthy muscle people that we look at, they are they have extremely good genetics, more so than just they have big genetics. They have good genetics in terms of they're present to the moment. They have brain chemistry that allows them to be patient and defer gratification. They have, recovery abilities that allow them to, sleep good and, be really awake when they are awake and be very deeply asleep when they are asleep. Their body's making a lot of melatonin for sleep, a lot of serotonin and dopamine and the right things in the right ratios and testosterone and vitamin D. This stuff's all going to be interfered with via dysbiosis in your microbiome. So that's why you need, probiosis, if we're going to just invent a word. And word might already be invented, but you want, a good microbiome is the bottom line. If you want to be rich, if you want to feel good, if you want to be motivated, if you want to be charming, if you want to have a lot of friends and people want to be around you and listen to you and give you attention, you don't want to be a whiny person with chronic illness. And that's no diss to people with chronic illness, but it's to say, if you can control, part of your destiny with your microbiome, Why put yourself in a position where your brain chemistry gives you no option other than to whine and other than to be negative and like kind of parasitical and just like thinking short term? The microbiome is such a major key in our lives and in our destiny that I had to make this video. So the Spencer McNett, this is Occult Warehouse. This knowledge about the microbiome is becoming, it's not really hidden in the same way that maybe some conspiracy theories were hidden, but it is a very interesting tidbit to put on the Occult Warehouse, and this has a broader application for health, for people looking at health information, for people looking at, building muscle, getting better focus, feeling better mentally. So I'm very happy to be able to make this video and to be able to use this slideshow application to do it, because it's a really cool application. Thank you, and I will catch you next time.